Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Hello. My name is Takiwa Smith. I'm founder and executive director of Science, Engineering, Mathematics Link, and I want to welcome you to our Math and Science Career Academy STEM in the City workshop. We are winding down our 2021 program year, so this is our last STEM in the City workshop for this program year. But we are so excited that we are able to do this virtually and have a wonderful guest for you. So the purpose of our STEM and City workshop is to expose you to earth and environmental sciences and or geosciences so you can recognize the science career paths that are connected to your everyday lives. I'm a firm believer that science is all around us and we don't realize it. And it's the earth and environmental sciences that directly impact our everyday lives. And so it is important that you all learn not only what those fields are, but the people that do that work, so that if you're interested in that, you know they exist and the career paths that you can take. And so I'm going to turn it over to our program coordinator, Carlin Pounders, who is going to introduce our speaker for our STEM in the City workshop.
Thank you, Takiwa. Hi, everyone. Who is ready for this last STEM in the City of the academic year? So our speaker for today is Dr. Melanie Harrison Okoro. Before starting Eco Alpha, Dr. Okoro worked in a variety of advisory positions at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, also known as the NOAA, in California. As Chief Operating Officer and founder of Eco Alpha, Melanie successfully leads a team of expert environmental and engineering professionals in the areas of water, transportation, utilities, and commercial real estate. She is a thought leader and advocate for increasing diversity and inclusion in the STEM workforce, which we know is very important, and has served on the board of the American Geophysical Union as an early career scientist. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Dr. Okoro.
Good morning. I'm here in California, so on 2 different time zones we're having this presentation, but I'm excited to be here. I first want to thank Takiwa as well as Carlin and Simley for inviting me here to chat with you all today. As Carlin mentioned, I was a former scientist with NOAA turned entrepreneur. And so one of the questions that I often get is, how did I make that transition? And so today's presentation is an opportunity for me to share with you how I made that transition from an environmental steward to an entrepreneur. But I'd also like to share tips and helpful tools that you might be able to use if you're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur. So I'm going to share my slides with you. Carlin and Takiwa, are you able to see the slides?
We see the slides. You're all good.
Fantastic. So again, I want to say thank you to everyone for joining me on a Saturday. I know sometimes that can be a little bit difficult, but hopefully my journey from an environmental scientist to an entrepreneur might empower you or help you in some way along your career path and journey. Again, I want to thank SimLink for the opportunity to present today and share with you some of the challenges, how to understand the market as an entrepreneur, really having a vision and a mission for going into the field of entrepreneurship. But I also wanted to talk about the realities, right? How to recognize and prepare for the risks of being an entrepreneur. which is a very different mindset than being a scientist. And I also want to take you through the 3 phases of success that I think an entrepreneurship should focus on when they're going through this process. One of the first steps is simply planning. In that, I call it confronting your truths, identifying your values, your goals, what you're passionate about. And in phase 2, completing an analysis of what the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities are, holding yourself accountable and taking ownership of your own career path and journey in life, and then implementing key tools and strategies for success along your entrepreneurship journey. I'd like to share with everyone just a couple of challenges that I faced working at NOAA as an environmental scientist. Turns out I love working at NOAA, and I love the colleagues that I work with on a day-to-day basis. The mission of science, service, and stewardship is one that, for me, hit home growing up as a young girl in rural Alabama, always being out in the environment, learning from my great-grandmother who fished and also had her own garden. And so to me, she was my first example and role model as an environmentalist. As I began my journey with NOAA, I had an opportunity to conduct research and publish and to just experience the career field of being a scientist at a top level organization. But I was also challenged. I love to create and I love to build. And turns out that entrepreneurs also love to do those 2 things, build teams and create companies, as well as solve problems. So one of my first challenges was to figure out, how was I going to achieve this goal of creating and building while still being an environmental scientist with NOAA? A lot of folks have asked me in the past, why did you risk the opportunity? Because being a federal scientist is a great position to have. But quite frankly, I had transitioned from the work that I was doing at NOAA to simply wanting to do something a little bit different. And I had to grapple with whether that was okay or not. And so if you're challenged by where you currently are in your life right now, know that in every phases of your life, there will always be transitions, right? And can you identify whether or not you're willing to take the risk to follow your dreams? I ask myself, if I stayed within my current position and didn't pursue my dream of entrepreneurship, what might be different for me in 6 months, a year, or 5 years from now? But again, I had a vision. And what I've often found is that many minorities, leaders who are in the field of environmental science, geologists, chemists, also are great stewards of the environment. These scientists are distinguished as much by their mindset, but also by their life experiences. We typically have a strong sense of mission and giving back to our URM communities. And sometimes when you're in an organization, you're bound by their mission and their vision. And entrepreneurship allowed me the opportunity to pursue my mission and vision of giving back to underrepresented minority communities. in building my own company. We all know that the demographics of our population is shifting. There's global competitiveness in the market, but you can carve out a niche for yourself if you can develop solutions to solve complex problems. Turns out that is a skill set that can serve anyone well in their current position, but also as an entrepreneur. At all phases of your life, whether you're going through a career transition, a personal transition, there are always opportunities to learn, grow, and improve. And in particular, as an entrepreneur, you have a great opportunity to reach and engage a larger member of society. What I've often found in being a scientist, again, is that you might be limited by what an organization might simply be able to provide for you. And so it's up to you to step out, to identify those areas that you're passionate about, connect and engage with others in your field, and also the field that you're thinking to get into, but often know that there might oftentimes be a misalignment. And so you have to make a decision if your current reality fits your vision. And if that doesn't, like it wasn't for me, it might be time to make a transition. So it's really important to know who you are, whether you're an expert in the field with a number of years of industry experience, whether you're a specialist that can solve complex problems, whether you're sought out for your expertise, or whether you're a leader that can bring people together to solve complex problems. It's really important to know who you are and what your strengths are. Knowing who you are can help you in various phases of your life, but as an entrepreneur, it really provides a great roadmap, a place for you to start to get to where you're going. I want to talk a little bit about strategic planning, which is so important. And again, confronting your truths. Goldsmith, from a book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There, probably provides one of the most widely used quotes that I use, that people will do something, including changing their behavior, only if it can be demonstrated that doing so will be in their own best interest as defined by their values. And it turns out that values are really the most important piece to identify what's important for you now, before you to think about what will be important for you in the future. And for me, I really had to confront my own truth when I thought about transitioning from an environmental scientist to an entrepreneur. I know that one of my goals was to make sure that we were conserving and preserving our trust resources, whether that was soil, water, biological resources. I also believe that diversity spurs innovation. What do I mean by that? I mean diversity in thought, diversity in the people that you bring on board to help you solve that complex problems. But at the end of the day, I simply wanted to create and leave a legacy that supported not only the conservation of our trust resources, but the diversity that sustains that. And so I had to ask myself, what better way to accomplish the mission and my vision to meet my values is to start EcoAlpha. We often know that there's a gap between when you're making transitions between what you currently know and what you have to learn, right, to get better. And that's okay. You simply have to understand that you're going to need to be in a continuous learning environment in order to improve and get better. Don't be afraid of it. Embrace it. We also know there's a difference between identifying how you can close those gaps, right? You can close that gap through training, education, or a long-term investment in your career through professional development opportunities. Quite frankly, attending the SimLink event today is one of those professional development educational opportunities. It really is an opportunity to learn and hear from others who have been in different fields like myself and who have transitioned into a new area and are continuously learning as I go. What's very important is that you don't plan yourself to death, that you start marching towards your goal. So implementation is very important to your transition process. I'd always like to say, you got to make sure you execute your plan, making sure you're being consistent in your process. Don't measure yourself against someone else's success. Know, recognize, and embrace the fact that it is your own journey. What I found is that consistency and quality of work, quite frankly, will lead to success. And along the way, you can build upon your cultural strategy, how you want to implement diversity into your engagement with others and the communities you serve, and who are you going to focus your efforts around. For me, I am a proponent of working and serving the communities that I live and work in. It's very important to me. But those values aren't the same for others. And so again, going back to the first piece, it's important that you know who you are and you develop a keen strategy to help you implement your plan. Now I'd like to just talk about a few strategies and recommendations for excellence in entrepreneurship. But I'd like to ask a question first. I want you to think about how can you, as young leaders, promote an entrepreneurial mindset. One of the first things you need to do is really understand your market and who your risk factors are. Whether you work for an organization or you're an entrepreneur, you're going to have to understand their mission, their vision, and their culture, right? You're also going to have to understand and identify where the risks are for those organizations. What areas do they want to focus on and what's going to be important for them? And then identify whether or not they either align or they're in misalignment with what your future goals are. The next step is to make sure that you have community buy-in. Now, this community support can come from organizations such as SimLink or other organizations that are in your field. Well, one of the first things you do in order to find support is to find a common community that can help you with tools and resources to get to where you want to go. And finally, it's important as an entrepreneur for you to take time to measure your success. Enjoy the fruits of your labor and share your success with others. One of the action items that I'd like for you to take away today is to ask yourself 4 key questions on your journey to entrepreneurship. What does a changed mindset mean to you? What motivates you to come back day after day to do the work that you do? Essentially, what do you love to do? What values are important to you that really, if they were threatened, would make you change, right? And I'd like for you to take an opportunity to write down 3 actions you can implement in the next 4 weeks to jumpstart your changed mindset. With that, I'm happy to take any questions. And I'd like to thank SimLink again for the opportunity to chat with everyone today. Thank you.
Wow, there was so much value in what you just shared. I feel like, so I'm very familiar with the entrepreneurial space. So I feel like the youth and teens that view this just got like a pre-accelerator rundown of how they can really get their ideas going and have a solid foundation or if they want to pursue creating their own businesses like yourself. So I was really curious in the work that Eco Alpha does. I think it's so interesting the expansive areas that you guys operate in. I mean, water, transportation, utilities. Can you explain or share more about what it is like having a handle over all of these different areas?
You know what? I'll tell you, I've always loved the challenge. So the first thing I can say that it is a challenge, but that's okay. I think what's so great and exciting about leading a team of professionals is that they truly are professionals, right? So we get together, we discuss the needs of our clients, and we come up with solutions. And I think if you are thinking about being an entrepreneur, one of the most important things to know is that, you're not going to be the smartest person in the room. Your job is to really support and facilitate those that have been brought on to help you solve those problems. So I think that's probably one of the aspects of entrepreneurship that I love, but it is a challenge, and I love challenges.
I love that. So what has been your favorite project that you guys have worked on? I feel like that might be a difficult question to answer, but.
Oddly enough, what has been a great transition from being an environmental scientist to an entrepreneur is that the academic and scholarly background that I have has allowed me to move into the training sector for professionals, right? I can tell you that I'm probably a professional learner, and I love to see when others get it. They get the aha moment. And so our training division is one that has really grown out of a passion to upskill others in the current workforce and to work in the communities that have been primarily underserved. And for me, that's a passion that drives the work that I do in the other areas of environmental and engineering.
I love that. So when it comes to youth getting into environmental careers, into a line of work such as this, what would you say are some things that, they should take notice of, either, as they are in school and, they might be picking up on things that interest them in their studies, or even on a, upper undergraduate level, as, young folks are looking at careers in the environmental sciences, whether to be a scientist or an entrepreneur, what are just some things that they should keep in mind?
That's a really great question, Carlin. I think it's all about opportunities and awareness. Mm. And sometimes, depending on where students are geographically, those opportunities aren't always available. And so taking the initiative to talk with your teachers or instructors about what some of those opportunities might be. And then taking that next step and initiative to volunteer in these areas, seek out internships. Quite frankly, one of the best techniques that I've used is simply to follow up with individuals who have come to speak, either at a high school, either in a post-graduate academic setting, because those individuals came and spent their time with you because they want to help. And so take the initiative, make the phone call, send me an email. I know there are many forms of social media. Use your social media as much as you possibly can to reach out and identify those opportunities that are available to you. But I think, you got to take the initiative.
I definitely love that. And I feel like this is such a timely workshop to have with, as we all know, the academic year coming to a close. So now kids have what I would presume to be a lot more time to devote to any of these ideas or businesses that they want to, start and grow one day. So I definitely feel like what you have shared today would help them in that regard.
I'm hoping so, because we often use the term in our scientific field that entrepreneurship is an alternative career path, right? But it's all about your frame of reference, right? So it is a pathway, right, for you to pursue your dreams, just like, medical school or becoming a civil engineer. An entrepreneurial pathway is a way for you to create and to build and to solve problems. And so I've been sharing with others a lot about this key term of entrepreneurship being an alternative pathway. I'd like to just highlight it can be a primary pathway to success and to growth, and to still, be fully engaged in the STEM fields.
That's great. So I have a few questions. So I was thinking something that you said, which is the reason that, a mutual colleague of a friend of ours in the SEM Link Advisory Board, Dr. Latoya Miles, said this was such a necessary program for us to have. You mentioned that your great grandmother fishing and hunting is what got you interested in pursuing a career in environmental scientist. So how can youth make those connections on what they do every day that they don't even think is science, right? My grandmother's had a garden. I can't grow nothing to save my life. But, if you have those interests that people don't even make the connection to science, how did you make that connection to pursue your career in environmental sciences? And how can kids make that connection, decide what they want to major in college, so that real world, for lack of better terms, elder ancestor knowledge can actually turn into a fulfilling STEM career?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really wish that I had made that connection earlier in my career. I probably didn't make that connection until I graduated undergrad and I was in the medical field and realized that this wasn't the field for me. And the reason why it wasn't the field for me is because I was surrounded by 4 white walls all day. And the previous work that I had done was in wetlands, in urban environments, in water quality, in nutrients. And there was a solitude and a calmness about doing the research and working in this field that, quite frankly, I was really good at and that I loved, right? So I would say to students, and use me an example, try to make those connections earlier. Observe what's around you. Where are you going? What are you doing? And what do you like to do? Because so many times we'll get to undergrad, and they'll say, declare your major. And you take these courses, and you spend the money, and oftentimes you might come out with a degree that, I want to change my major. This is not a career field that I want to pursue. So try to make the connections early so that it can really help you guide the rest of your journey.
And how does that shape your work now, especially as an entrepreneur and choosing projects, right? Because our community as communities of color, and especially as Black people, we're impacted by other people's decisions that affect our environment and our quality of life. And so how does that shape the decisions with the projects that you choose, as well as you, like, I'm sure that was a factor in you going into entrepreneurship, right?
That was definitely a factor in going into entrepreneurship. And being in the environmental sciences field, in proportion, there's just not a lot of women of color, right? And so it's important that as an entrepreneur, when I'm in these spaces, to make sure that I am a voice for other minority entrepreneurs in the areas. But also when you're working on projects, we oftentimes have a different perspective, right? And so bringing those issues to light, those that are around environmental justice and water quality issues on some of the projects that we work on, making sure dollars are spent and projects are implemented in areas where they just have not been done so in the past, but making sure that when you're in these spaces and on these projects, that where appropriate, you're making sure that you're being a voice for those who have experienced some of the things that I talked about.
Okay, and I have two more questions and then we're gonna wrap up, because in true scientist form, I'm like, she did that 15 to 20-minute presentation like we're in the talks. And I love it because, in general, that's the time that we're gonna have, right, to present. You and I all talk about being HBCU alum. How did HBCUs in that experience shape you? As an entrepreneur, as an environmental scientist, and help you do your work or move through the world professionally?
Right. So I went to a historically Black college in Charlotte, North Carolina, Johnson C. Smith University. And this university, for me, it was great. It was, now it's touted as an urban college, but it was fantastic. It was right in the middle of Charlotte. Right, so all of the issues around water quality, food safety, resources, climate, all of those things you can study in that environment. What was great about going to JCSU was that I got an opportunity to have role models, mentors, instructors, and teachers who looked like myself, right? So it was amazing to have those role models to show me the way, to be as hard on me and everyone else as they possibly could, and to make sure that they were implementing really the tools we needed to be successful outside of JCSU, because we've recognized that it is a predominantly minority serving institution. We're always at the tip top of our game. So that to me was a star in the cap, just to say that I know that the education that I'm receiving is the best. And that is probably, for me, continuing that legacy is, I think, and not I think, I know will be one of the things that I want to pass on to my daughter, and then the next generation too. just uplifting HBCUs, to be quite honest.
Yeah, because I think that, your former agency, NOAA, had so many centers at HBCUs to do great work and produce great environmental scientists. I joke, both of us know Dr. Vernon Morris, and he was one of our speakers. And I joke, and I'm like, Dr. Morris, about half of the Black and Brown environmental scientists are connected to you, and his being, HBCU alum at Morehouse, and working in Howard, I do think that we have this, very proud of our institutions, but we leave doing great things and then knowing to give back, right? And to lift as we climb throughout our entire career. And so I have one final question. That you can get back into bed or go about your day because it's so early there. So we really appreciate you waking up and giving this talk. What are your words of wisdom if you want to leave for any student that either wants to be a environmental engineer, scientist, who wants to be an entrepreneur but don't know where to start, wanting to know, can they do that right after undergrad, grad school? What words of wisdom do you have for those students that are interested?
Well, one of the first things I want to say is never underestimate yourself. Never underestimate that you have the ability to really change where you are and create the world that you want to live in. I think that so many of us, and even at times myself, the unknown is a scary place, right? And so typically where you sit right now is your area of stability. But in any transition that you make in life, whether it's going from high school to college, from college to graduate school, from high school to entrepreneur, any transition that you make comes with uncertainty. You're going to have to learn things that you didn't know before. So when I talk about an entrepreneurial mindset, it's a change in mindset from thinking that you're taking such a big risk in your life to making sure that the risks are well planned out but calculated, right? And so don't underestimate your ability to change, your current circumstances to really live the life that you imagine.
Wow, that is such great words of wisdom. I feel like you could, I just heard a motivational speaker versus a scientist. So thank you so much for that. And in closing, I just want to remind everyone, whether you're watching it live or catching on YouTube later, to fill out the survey that Carlin put in the link. So although this is our last in the City workshop for this academic year, this isn't our last programming. We are coming back after summer hiatus, which you need to follow us on. Well, I'll let Carlin talk about what we're doing over the summer quickly. But it's important that we get this feedback from you as we shape our programming and plan for next program year. And thank you so much. I was going to call you Melanie, Dr. Okoro, for making time out of your day and sharing the knowledge about entrepreneurial path. Carlin made a connection that I didn't, that all of our speakers for all of our program activities this month were entrepreneurs. And so I think it's just a great path to think about, because when we think about STEM professional, everyone tells us to go to school, get a job, right? But no one talks about the different ways that we can be entrepreneurs as a STEM professional and use that knowledge, passion, and STEM to not only follow our career goals and dreams and achieve them, but also create job opportunities for others. And so thank you so much for being an example of that. And so in closing, I'm just going to say thank you so much for being our speaker. And thank you everyone for joining today's STEM in the City workshop.
Yes. Thank you so much. Please make sure you're following us on social media at SimLink. This summer, we will still have, as part of some programming, Instagram takeovers with youth who are very involved in STEM. And as Dr. Okoro spoke to today, are young leaders in STEM. So you definitely don't want to miss that, as well as programming that will empower you to be able to speak STEM on social media through your own knowledge and passion, as he was just described. So just make sure you're following us at SimLink on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.